In 1988, an employee from Taito traveled to New Zealand and when coming back slammed his hands down on the desk and said, "Make a game about that!" And thus, the New Zealand story was born. It's an innocent enough seeming game where you play as a Kiwi named Tiki who's off to rescue his girlfriend and other friends who have been kidnapped by, depending on which version you refer to, either a walrus or leopard seal. And to accomplish this will require traveling through 5 worlds of 4 levels each where you'll be jumping, shooting arrows, and riding on hot air balloons. Like most Taito arcade games, it was ported over to the NES in the year 1990, although not without some changes, the biggest of which being the name, which for some reason changed from the New Zealand story to Kiwi Kraze. Why? It's anyone's guess. Maybe Nintendo had censorship against New Zealand or something, but that's what we're dealing with today, and overall it's a game that had completely eluded my attention until I pulled it off the shelf as part of my NES adventure. And as a result, I'm much more familiar with the NES version compared to the arcade version. So this is not going to be a video where we compare all the differences and talk about how the NES one may be worse in several ways. But it's important that even ports of arcade games are good enough to stand on their own. You shouldn't have to have that background with the arcade one to enjoy the NES one. So we're going to be judging the NES as its standalone game today, while from time to time pointing out things that may have changed compared to its original arcade release. With that said, let's dive into this game with the pretense that I will just add in here to kind of set the mood. This is one of the only NES games that by the end of it, I had a splitting headache. So interpret that as you will, as we talk about the wonderful world of the New Zealand story, or Kiwi Kraze, or whatever you prefer to call it. So my first impressions of this game, since like I said I had never played it in any form before, is that it was kind of like Mega Man. I mean, who doesn't want more Mega Man on the NES? You're jumping, you're shooting, you're playing through platforming levels. Overall, things were seeming pretty good. There's even bosses in there and the boss fights aren't too bad. Sometimes even being pretty creative where like you'll fight the boss from the outside and then it will eat you and then you're fighting it from the inside. Like that is a pretty darn cool idea. But back to the main levels themselves. They typically involve jumping from platform to platform, navigating mazes, defeating enemies along the way, and a really interesting thing to note about the majority of enemies in Kiwi Kraze is that you can actually touch them directly without any negative consequences. It's only their attacks that do damage to you. Now this is not always true. You kind of need to learn which enemies are the ones you can't touch and which ones are the ones you can, but it is just a neat kind of concept to see that enemies themselves aren't what damages you, it's only their attacks. So kind of not as bad as it could be. So keep that in mind if you're playing this game. Definitely lowers the difficulty a little bit, but don't expect it to not be pretty tough, especially in the later stages. One good thing though that can kind of make things easier in the early game is that in worlds 1 through 3, whenever you lose a life, you will start at a checkpoint, which will be relatively nearby. However, in worlds 4 and 5, any death requires you to replay the entire level. And again, if you're just kind of taking this game off the shelf and trying it for the first time, you're gonna find out the levels are actually pretty short. It's like, what is this? This is so simple. That's pretty much like a straight line from beginning to end. But by the end, levels are in a rectangular shape, which can range from being kind of a smaller rectangle or to a massive ones by the end. And they use every single spare inch of this rectangle to just include winding, twirling paths that you are required to navigate to get to the end. If you watched my Blues Brothers review, you'll know about those pipes that they stuck in the wall for no reason whatsoever other than just to consume space, and that is what the Kiwi Kraze ends up boiling down to. Instead of just being a fun platforming level to play through, you are just winding through every single kind of square inch of these rectangular levels, and it is tedious, especially in those worlds 4 and 5, where a death means you're replaying all of that all over again. Not to mention that as the levels get more and more maze-like, where again, you're going through all these twisting paths, and sometimes there'll even be dead-end ones where you spend like 30 seconds exploring this dead end. It's like, no, you gotta head back. Levels have time limits that is not displayed anywhere on screen. So you will just be kind of exploring a level, trying to figure out where the heck you're supposed to go, all while doing platforming and dodging enemies and all the other things that you'd expect to come along with a game like this. And just out of nowhere, it will tell you to hurry up because you are almost out of time. Like, who thought that a time limit was a good idea for this game? And I understand it has arcade origins, and a time limit is very much an arcade game concept, but it does not lend itself well at all to Kiwi Kraze. And so often, like, you're not even taking that long. You're just kind of playing through the level normally, being moderately cautious because you'll just want to rush in because you never know what's going to happen, and then just that hurry up message will appear, and it's crazy. One sort of saving grace, though, is that running out of time does not mean an instant death. It just means that you will start to be chased around the screen by this devil enemy who is faster than you are and who will definitely be getting in your way. So it's almost the same as kind of an instant death, but you have a little bit of opportunity to avoid this guy if you are kind of closing in on the end. But otherwise, yeah, there's time limits in a game where you have to navigate every square inch of a giant rectangle with dead ends sometimes. So good luck on that one. Not to mention that there are actually a lot of water sections in this game, and the water sections are so slow. Like, my goodness, this guy swims super slow. And in addition to that, you have an air meter in this game. So not only is there a time limit, which again you are completely oblivious to, not displayed anywhere, this kind of creeps up on you out of nowhere. There's no time management strategy at all, unless you've like timed each level out and start a stopwatch at the beginning of each level or something. But no, there's now water that has an air meter as well. So it's like a time limit on top of your time limit, and you have to manage that as well. So now you're kind of swimming through these passageways, and you always have to stop for air, let the bar fill up a little bit. Maybe you don't need to let it fill up to max, or maybe you do because you really have no idea what's coming up ahead, and you don't want to kind of go when your air meter's only at half full just to realize you didn't fill it up enough. So that's all sorts of waste of time, which once again just contributes to that time limit running out and the devil guy coming to get you. Oh man, is it a mess. And have you noticed something about all these different sections we've looked at? Perhaps you have, and that's that everything the exact same color, and this contributed so much too. That headache I was telling you all about. It's like everything is yellow or everything is red. It's just like, let's make everything, the platforms, the background, the spikes, everything the exact same color. The water, it's like, oh my eye just squinting trying to discern the different things on screen. It's brutal, and you know, we're watching this, you're gonna be watching this in the form of an HD video. Now imagine this on like a smaller CRT television with a bit of a blur to it. It was really rough. And there are limited continues in this game, so there's live, you know, and then you can only continue a couple times, and then you're replaying the whole game again, so you're gonna get a headache real quick if that's the sort of situation you, for whatever reason, feel like putting yourself into, which I don't advise. But oh, just there's so much potential for this game to look nice. Like, there are actually times when it looks kind of nice. It's like, wow, we actually have some background, some different colors, and then nope, wait, can't have that. Everything's a solid color again. Oh, it just messes with your head and just burns my eyes to look at that. Maybe you're lucky and you're different, but oh, I have nightmares just thinking about it, unfortunately. Perhaps we should change the subject for a second, though. Let's look at something a bit more positive about the Kiwi Kraze. I don't know if I meant to jump in so quick to the negative stuff, but hopefully you're kind of seeing the point I'm trying to get at here. A main feature of Kiwi Kraze, aside from the jumping and the shooting arrows, is the hot air balloons that enemies ride, and after defeating those enemies, you then take their hot air balloon and you can ride around on it as well. And this is kind of neat from time to time. You gotta navigate around some obstacles, helps you explore the levels a little bit more when they're not just these like confined passageways you're trying to fit your way through. The weirdest thing about it though is that like the hitbox makes no sense. It's like when you're on the hot air balloon, it's like your character just phases through everything, and it's the hot air balloon itself that for some reason is all that takes damage, and they're trying to fit your way into all these awkward places. But again, it's an interesting system at least. That is, until you're running into spikes that you could not even see for whatever reason, and this is definitely an interesting thing. A lot of NES games will use 16 by 16 pixel tiles. Think Super Mario Brothers, all the question mark blocks, the brick blocks, they're all 16 by 16 tiles, nice and big, very easy to see on the screen, the same size as Mario himself when he's in his smaller form. Then you get Kiwi Kraze here, and it opts to place its tiles in 8x8 size. And again, just combined with the fact that everything's the same color, you're playing this on a CRT television, things are kind of blurry and unclear at times. Good luck interpreting what things are sometimes, because they were smart enough to include 8x8 spike balls. There is no way to draw a proper looking spike ball with 8x8 pixels, so good luck not just smashing into these all over the place, because again, they blend in with the background first of all, and second of all, it's like, is that a block I can stand on? No, that was a spike that just killed me right there. And this is gonna happen over and over again. Your mind just does not even see these blending in with the background because they're so tiny, and they don't even look like spikes. At least if they were a different color, they would stand out a little bit more, but so often they don't. Oh man, it is rough. And then on top of that, how about enemies that just spawn in from absolute nowhere? Because that's the thing in this game, is that enemies aren't really on screen sometimes until you get close, and then they kind of appear from like a door and just drop down. But so many times, you'll just be playing the level, you'll see very clearly that there's nothing coming up ahead, and then all of a sudden, enemy just drops on you, you're dead, and it's like, oh man. Time to, depending on which world you're in, either replay the whole level or, there goes a life at the very least, and you definitely want to keep those because you don't have infinite of them. So just so many things that kind of dampen the experience. In a game that, again, I mentioned, I put it in, and I'm like, oh man, if this is like Mega Man, it's going to be great. If this is Taito's Mega Man, but I should have known better because I've already mentioned before that Power Blade, if you want the Taito Mega Man experience, go play that. By far my favorite Taito game that I've at least hit so far. I don't have too many left. Actually, funny enough, 3 of the 4 NES games that I'm still missing from my collection are Taito games. So, Takeaway Stadium Events, kind of just a different label for world-class track meet. The 3 completely unique games that I'm still missing for the NES are Panic Restaurant, Lil Samson, and Flintstone Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, all made by Taito. Like, yeah, of all companies for the remaining games to be made by, it kind of scares me a little bit based on my experience here with Kiwi Kraze and some other Taito games which we've talked about in the past. But man, I don't know. I don't know what to make of Kiwi Kraze. I'd love to hear everyone else's thoughts. The arcade version's definitely the one to go with. I was fortunate enough, after I played the NES one, I actually was out at a place and they had one of those arcade machines with a bunch of games in it, and I was able to play some Kiwi Kraze. I'm like, wow, this controls a lot better. There's a lot more color. It just feels a lot better. There's more features as well. There's items in Kiwi Kraze on the NES. There's also a cane item, which just makes you invincible for a little while. However, for example, in the arcade game, when you pick up the cane, instead of making you invincible, now you can shoot fireballs. So there's definitely some differences there, as well as, unlike just being able to ride hot air balloons in the NES version, there's some other vehicles you can ride in the arcade one as well. So there's definitely some differences, and if you're gonna play Kiwi Kraze / the New Zealand story, you'd likely want to look into that arcade one, which is available on various platforms as well now. I think it has a Switch release through Arcade Archives. There's like Taito Legends on the Gen 6 stuff that you can check it out on, Xbox and PS2 and all that. So there's definitely ways to play the original that you might want to consider before diving into the NES one, which again, I really wanted to love. But, if you check it out for a little bit, you might not pick up on exactly what I'm talking about here. But if you really dive into it, and you get to those later levels where they're just really kind of messes on the screen, where you're just looping back and forth through narrow passages, and when you die, you have to do it all over again, all under a time limit as well, but you have no idea what that time limit is, it gets tough. It gets pretty tough. And have I mentioned that the exact same music track plays in every single stage? Now, to be fair, it's not that bad of a track. It's about 40 seconds long, so it's a decent loop. It sounds pretty good. It could be much, much worse compared to some other things I've seen in NES games. But after about an hour and replaying levels, replaying the game from the beginning after you get too many game overs, you are going to be so sick of this song. Reminds me almost of Bubble Bobble, where it's, again, 100 stages of the exact same song, but, even then, that loop's a little bit shorter than this one. But it gets rough, and it's just another thing that adds to the headache that this game causes. Eventually, though, I toughed it out. It's one of those cases where it probably should have taken a bit of a break, but then that meant I would have had a headache for like 2 days, and I figured, all right, we'll just get it done today, and then, we can rest easy tomorrow. But man, yeah, it's a bit of a grind to get to the end. The boss is probably one of the highlights. The bosses are pretty cool, and flying around on the hot air balloons, again, is neat when, the game can't be a gigantic jerk and just drop enemies on top of your head, because you can shoot left and right, but you're completely defenseless if anything comes from above. And then those swimming sections, World 4 is all about water. So many swimming sections. And then at the end of World 4 actually doesn't have a boss. Instead, you have to go through this boat, and no matter how many times you look at it, it's like, what the heck am I even seeing here? How do I interpret this in my mind? It's this like solid yellow boat, and you need to discern walls, the background, 8x8 pixel spikes. Who thought that was a good idea? Who? And I don't know how many of my runs I'd get to that part. I've just burned like 3 lives on this silly boat. That it's not that bad, but at the same time it's pretty bad, and you need to kind of experience it for yourself. But with that, I think I've gone over Kiwi Kraze quite enough. Again, I encourage you to try it for yourself. Let me know what you think. Again, there's the arcade version, the NES version, a few other ports. There's even like a DS version I've heard. Again, the series not being on my radar at all until I played Kiwi Kraze last year. So I'm definitely curious to learn more about it, although I'm going to be very cautious. don't need any more pain. I'd assume that other versions, though, hopefully have better use of color. I think that just goes a long way itself to not giving you a headache. You know, people talk about the Virtual Boy being all red. Well, here you have Kiwi Kraze being all yellow, all blue, all green, all red. Whatever it could be. But thanks again for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed learning about Kiwi Kraze or the New Zealand story. I'm not going to go on about that again. I hope to see you next time for something different. So thanks and take care.